Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle SMB Finance Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partner is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Teddy Collins, Vice President of Corporate Finance at SeatGeek. We're excited to have Teddy and our panelists with us for a discussion titled SMB Data Security and Risk Management. Welcome, Teddy, and over to you.
Thank you, Brittany. And welcome to the audience. We're super excited to talk on an exciting topic in my mind, and we have a great diverse set of folks across finance and risk management professionals. Just wanted to start with each of the panelists doing a brief introduction of yourselves. Alonso, want to kick us off?
Thank you so much, Teddy. My name is Alonso Ramos. I've been a CFO during the last 6 years in different public and private sectors, mostly in the manufacturing area. Previously, I held positions of increasing responsibility with Colgate-Palmolive for 23 years in the USA, but also internationally. Right now, I'm the CFO of the Intech Group here in Palatine, Illinois. And thanks so much for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. Dogan.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Angela Davis Dogan, and I am President and CEO of Davis Dogan Advisory Services, where we do risk management the right way. And I've spent the past 17 years in the space, helping organizations build information security risk management programs, third-party risk management programs, GRC as a whole. And I also teach in the arena of cybersecurity at University of Buffalo and NC State.
That's great. And Christopher.
Hello, my name is Christopher Hollinger. I'm the CFO at Rethink Food, based here in New York City. In addition to managing the finance function here at Rethink Food, I also manage our strategy team, our technology team, our data analytics team, and our administration team. So work very closely in the data analytics, data information security space, technology space with my team that reports to me. So happy to be a part of this conversation, which I think is very important for a lot of businesses, and hope to give some good insights and be able to answer your questions.
Yeah, let's just stay with you, Christopher, and just kind of tell me a bit more about your perspective on data security, kind of coming from the office of the CFO, and how is it, previous roles, how has it changed for you over time?
Sure, I would say that some of the big things that we're really focused on, clearly, we are responsible for accounts payable, accounts receivable. We do it, we're nonprofit, so we work with a lot of institutional foundations. We work with individuals, so we're privy to a lot of information that those people provide us as they're making donations. We also do work with the state and city government here in New York. And so there are a lot of requirements around being able to maintain information, maintain data, and information security. So we're very diligent. We have very robust policies, procedures in place. As we were doing the pre-conversation, one of the things that Dr. Dogan really brought up, which is true for us, is you have to really have a lot of processes, procedures in place around how you handle and process and work with first information, data, particularly private personal data. And then you put in the technology to store that data, to be able to access that data. but you have to have the policies and procedures in place first. And I think we did a really good job of building that and put that in place before we looked at what kind of technologies we really wanted to use.
That's super interesting. And Dr. Dogan, given you've seen probably the most kind of control environments out there, kind of how do companies typically come into, see the light of the importance of risk management, given it's something that it might not be a problem until it's a problem. So how do people find their way to your world, proactive versus reactive?
So I wish that I could say every organization I've dealt with has taken a proactive approach. However, the reality is there's one of two things that drives organizations to really want to build robust data security programs. And that is either regulatory requirements, client requirements, or they've been breached. So I said there was one or two, but that's actually three. And there are three top priorities. I promote people taking a proactive approach. Number one, you're not pressed for time. You don't have the ins and outs of incident response weighing over your head if you waited until a breach. And really, no matter what size organization you are, I suggest proactive approach because your size doesn't really matter. It's the data that matters. And so, getting a handle on how you're going to mitigate and manage risk, whether it be you choose to accept the risk, put mitigation and controls in place, or you choose to transfer the risk, right? And that's where cybersecurity insurance come to play. But being proactive about having formalized policies, processes, and procedures, for me, that's what I'm a cheerleader for.
Yeah, how can it can be quite an intimidating topic to go from 0 to 1 is kind of the hardest thing. What are some kind of practical bite-sized things that companies can do? And maybe they don't have the skill sets or people from that industry to help them out. So what are some kind of practical first steps?
So really making sure you've looked at your systems, you've looked at what type of data you house, process, or store, and then right sizing your security measures based on what you have, right? So, unfortunately, organizations are out to make money, which is also fortunate. But from a cybersecurity perspective, cybersecurity typically doesn't generate revenue. So budgets tend to be tight. And so you have to be very knowledgeable about what you have. What are your crown jewels, right? And what is the most efficient and effective way we can protect them? I mean, starting with firewalls, right? Segregated networks, segmented, right? Those are things that you can definitely start off doing before you go buying the fancy schmancy tools, right? Or look at your budget and carve out money to see if you can hire a expert. You can outsource that piece. Sometimes that tends to be less expensive than trying to build it all yourself. So it's just really about figuring out what your organization has, what you need to do, and what can you afford to do.
Definitely. Love to get Alonso into the conversation. As a CFO, how do you approach that low probability, high damage potential, and how do you approach that from a budgeting perspective, from an ROI perspective, when you're talking about making investments to your boards or other stakeholders?
Well, the interesting part is that right now in a small to medium company, and it's easy to think that a company like ours could not be a subject of an attack. However, we already were the victims of a ransomware, and we have to, well, fortunately enough, we have an insurance coverage for that, and we were able to, well, we have to pay the ransom, and we were able to get back our network. So based on that, what I can tell you is that we need to take it very seriously, regardless of your size. And specifically to your question, things that we've done is especially a lot of education. We know that phishing is one of the most effective ways for to get hacked, because it's people fall for it. And that's how we actually, our company had that, exactly that's how it got hacked. So we do a lot of education on that regard. That's not necessarily that expensive, but it is we haven't been hacked again, at least. So I think we have focus on that. We maintain another insurance coverage at this point. They actually, insurance company has been very instrumental on doing the education and setting up a process. And then we do like very normal things that probably most people do, I would say, like cap up, eliminate redundant systems that could make more vulnerable, and have a multi-identification, multiple steps to identify, manage the key management as well. And by saying all this, I mean, there are many efforts we've done, but also want to stress that we try to keep it simple, if that makes sense. Like sometimes, I mean, when you start talking to people, okay, we were subject of a cyber attack, we need to take certain steps. It could easily get very, very complex on the mind of many people, and then set it on these crazy passwords, and then renewals, and with a very extreme, complicated set of characteristics to create new passwords and things like that, and many other things. And it's in order to make it effective and for people to follow it, they need to be simple as well. We need to give people, we have found out that it's better to give people very simple instructions of things that they should do, things they shouldn't do, things that they should watch out, and the things they need to follow up and learn. But at the same time, make it something that is manageable for them. And I think that's another initiative that we have taken. And again, as I told you, I mean, we haven't been subject of another attack anymore, at least at this point. Hopefully, we'll keep it that way.
Just stay with you for 1 sec. So that kind of attack that you just mentioned, that's a real kind of event. What type of, tell me a bit more about the kind of the employee sentiment kind of going through that, and that seems possibly like a kind of a culture changing event. How was kind of life? Was it kind of life before and life after, and it will never be the same?
Let me tell you how it happened. Then it was through phishing again. Many of our employees receive random emails, in one of those in which you have to click on a link, and that link takes you to a hacker. It comes with a form, and it somehow they try to manipulate the mind of the user, and prompt them to enter the username and password. And many people did. This particular user that was the subject of the attack did that, and the hacker took that information later on to log in as him into our system, and was able to find out where the information was in our server and block it. So that's how the ransom worked. And well, after the intervention of the insurance company, we paid the ransom, and it was liberated. But we did several education series after that. At a certain point, we did the same. I mean, submit our own emails with the same technique of phishing to see if the people will fall for it. And many of our users, the employees, still did it. Some just click on the link. Some others click on the link and went to the site. Some others went to the site and also re-entered the user and password. And then we come up with a report and say, okay, for those offenders, I mean, we need to talk to them again and get educated and explain, I mean, what is the impact of that. And but still people keep falling for it. And it is sometimes it's amazing how easy it is. And as we educate them better and understanding all the little, there are a bunch of little signals that will tell you this is a cyber attack. In our firewalls and our security tools don't necessarily gonna capture every single thing. I mean, they're gonna capture 99% of those emails or the other techniques, but not 100%. It's never perfect. There's always going to be a way to go around it and get to the target. And for that way, I mean, that's what could cause another attack. So it's again, I mean, going through a proper education can really help prevent this and make people understanding that how to read all the little signals or the little tips that this could be a cyber attack.
Very good. And Dr. Dogan, I'd love to get your thoughts on, so SMBs, I can see there's kind of, one or two worlds. There can be some more companies. How would let's say a cloud native company approach kind of risk management and identity access management stuff versus, let's say, a company that has more of a legacy, on-premises type technology stack? Any differences in how to approach the tool set or education?
So the number one thing that I would say you should do is, if you're entertaining a cloud service provider, utilizing a cloud service provider, whether that be infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, or even software as a service, you want to understand upfront who's going to be responsible for what security measures. So with a cloud service provider, you really want to take a shared responsibility model approach and get that ironed out up front before you even sign your name on the dotted line of a contract. Understand who's going to provide what security, what environment is your systems, your data going to be in. Is it going to be offshore? Is it going to be
One question is double clicking into that. Would you say, so for a lot of SMBs, they might just be signing up for online terms of service. They kind of are what they are. But if companies have a chance to, negotiate, in the MSA, certain terms, anything that they should be looking out for to focus on?
Again, even if you're signing up online, you still have those options.
Mm-hmm.
You still have the option to understand what security practices they're going to follow. They always follow. Are they certified in ISO 27001 and 2, or even do they follow the NIST framework? There are things, even if you're first of all, back up. Don't just randomly go on a site and sign up online without finding out these things first. Whether you're searching on the website, whether you're picking up the phone and calling them, don't do that. Don't do that, especially if you don't have a clear understanding of how your data and your systems are going to be secured. You can have all the insurance in the world, but you still have a responsibility to maintain security of that data, no matter whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. So you can find this information out. Doesn't really matter how you're signing up. You can still find out that information. You can pick up the phone, you can send an email. Most of the time when you go on their sites, the chat box pops up asking you if there's anything they can help you with. you don't have a reason or an excuse for not being able to find out the information that I'm talking about. You just have to be knowledgeable and aware that you need to ask the questions. So that really would be my 2 cents. But I have a question. It's actually a similar question to what's in the chat for Alonzo, and that is, you mentioned you have cyber insurance. How did you determine what type of coverage you need? And what things did you guys have covered? I'm interested in that myself.
Oh, yes. We have coverage for the different types. There are many different. I mentioned a lot random word because that's the type of attack we have. But there are many different types of attack that could happen, and in many different ways. So we have coverage for all those, like 4 or 5 major types of attacks, and for loss of data as well. If you lose the data for the suspension of business, your business can be, could be stopped. We're a manufacturing facility. We might need to, at a certain point, we might not have to stop production. There's coverage for that. And there's coverage for financial loss, if there could be a financial loss. Some things could be covered by the bank, depending of what kind of protection you have, but you can also lose money directly. In another case, but I know another company in which through artificial intelligence, they use the voice of a CFO, and they planned the whole thing when he was going to be out in a conference, and create a message directly to a voicemail, and send the instructions to do a wire transfer, and the employee went for it. They plan it very well, but it's just, you still can catch that if you know the signals. That didn't happen to us, but that's kind of the things that we have been educated on, and we have covered for financial loss as well. And you can go as far as you want. There's going to be a cost as well. We have reduced the cost, and we're seeing a little more offer on cybersecurity insurance, which is kind of making the prices a little more competitive. Now it's becoming more and more usual. Like in the past, you have an auto policy because everybody has an auto policy, right? Or commercial liability. Well, as common as those, I would say that nowadays it's everybody is required to have cyber. I cannot even think about, doing business unless you're extremely small, but you still need some security. But doing business without having a cyber security insurance is just crazy. Again, what Angela's saying is very important. You can have all the insurance in the world, that's great, have very good coverage or pay a lot of money in premium, that's okay. But that doesn't mean anything. You need to do, the whole objective is to not to get attacked, get another attack. So you need to do all the proper. And the other thing is that insurance companies also see this as a positive. The more efforts you do, the more they consider that into part of the risk they associate your company with, and they actually reduce your premiums as well. So finance is always important, and we as finance people want to decrease our premiums on insurance, and that's great. But the biggest objective is to prevent attacks as much as we can.
Great. Yeah, let's jump back over to Christopher, and can you talk a little bit more broadly about, let's say, finance transformations in general, and on this conference is more about accounts payable efficiencies and automation and intelligent receivables and items like that. What's that kind of journey been like for you, and then how has kind of security and risk management played into that transformation journey?
Yeah, I would say that, for us, because we do receive, we actually have an AP automated system that we use to pay our process our invoices. And, there's always the concern that, could get fake invoices, and then people are trying to, trick the system, go into the system. So I think that, and I think there was a question about AI in the chat about AI and AP and AR. And I think that, it's very important that, at least for us, and I think for a lot of organizations, you always still have to have a human touch or human factor before any transactional process. I know people want to automate things, and we're really big on automation because I believe that manual tasks to the degree they can be automated allows people to do more value-added analysis and things they're really interested in. But when you talk about your AP in particular, when you do have a system where an email, like for us, we have an email box where invoices will come in, then it automatically goes to the system, it's displayed for payment. But we also, for us, at least it does check for, do we already have the vendor in the system? And if we don't, there's a ping to us to look at it. But then before any money leaves our bank account, I have to approve everything. And so I think you always have to have that, at least that last touch human factor before any money leaves the bank or the AP system.
Yeah, definitely. Curious if kind of anyone on the call, any type of examples of some more clever, attempts at, getting money illicitly out of the company. I can know just from personal experience, the Silicon Valley Bank kind of shut down a few months ago. We just had an influx of both legitimate and not legitimate requests to quote unquote, reroute our invoices to other bank accounts. So I think that vendor onboarding process was is absolutely critical to know, kind of at least having some type of trusted party to start. We also have many people in the room, and we do payouts each week, and we kind of have multiple sets of eyes on things to make sure that people recognize the payments, things go through approval flows. But kind of any other things you've seen over the years of to look at?
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, I think we do get requests for emails from people to we've changed our bank account. Could you send it to X, Y, and Z? So we always as back again to process procedures. Our standard operating procedure is that when we do get requests, we always will, verify that with whoever, the person that we have on our contact train. So if it comes from someone that's not, if it does come from someone that's on our contact chain, we still will reach out to them and verify that they did indeed ask for that to be, for that to change. One of the things I noticed with a lot of, the foundations that particularly they send us money, they'll send, they'll want, an email or written press or, confirmation of the bank account, but then they'll also have another person to call and then voice verify also. So just having additional layers of approval, not necessarily approval, but verification that the bank account that is being asked to have the money sent to is indeed the bank account, and there is a live person on an officer of the organization confirms that.
How do you guys share that information? Because as you're talking about the operational aspects of being over finance, I got all kind of alarms going off in my head.
Okay.
And I have that because I'm wondering, being a risk professional, how you handle your operations, because your operations deals with a lot of sensitive data.
Correct.
Okay, so what security measures do you have in place? What education, right, which lends to one of the questions in the chat about phishing emails. What education do you have in place? Because I will tell all of you, listeners, panel, everybody, security awareness training is more than phishing email, more than phishing exercises. You can do phishing exercises all day long, but if you don't train your people on how to handle the systems, the data that they're responsible for, you're still gonna have high click rates.
Right.
You're gonna have issues. People, process, and technology are your three biggest threats, right? People being number one. And so in you guys' operations, you're in finance, right? How do you, as chief finance officers, ensure, number one, that security's thought about, it has a seat at the table, it's not an afterthought? And number two, how do you ensure that your people are handling the data properly?
Yeah, I'd say it kind of starts with the people, but we also try to kind of invest in IT infrastructure and our data architecture teams to set up people for success. It's not just like, hey, here's a 65-page manual, memorize it and do everything exactly. Let's actually get the data warehouse to only have people access to what they need. Let's put extra couple of steps between getting access to personal identifiable information. And then from the education front, I felt like a lot of the, sharing information back and forth, it's like, don't send bank account information, plain text over emails and social security numbers and stuff. So having a set of tools and processes available to people to use so that they don't feel like it's, on themselves to figure that stuff out.
Yes, if I may add a little bit here is that when you're doing, and now that we talk a lot about digital transformation using artificial intelligence and all that, from the design, from the initial phases, the cybersecurity should be considered. The access of every user is going to have, the process in which server, how the communication is going to be, how a transmission, who's going to have access to it or not, is not necessary. All the things need to be considered during the implementation process. And I think Angela said it very well, it's not an afterthought. It's not like that you come, like, for example, I want to implement new, there's a lot right now in account receivable, accounts payable, in procurement, and the list goes on and on. There's a lot of artificial intelligence and automatization you can implement. Okay, and if you consider that that's the best for your company, do it. It's great. But don't do the implementation, and then once you implement it, say, okay, let's see if we need to do some security parameterization here or set up. No, it should be from the beginning, from the design. That's where you capture, that's when you make sure that the whole implementation is secure from the beginning. So it should never be an afterthought. It should be even more now, because if you're talking about artificial intelligence, is like, as they say, I mean, if everything that you use is a computer right now, your car, your phone, your coffee machine, everything is hackable now. And hence everything needs to be, you need to think about cybersecurity on everything that you implement.
Not all it because we used to say if we get breached. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. At this point, you can be a Fortune 500 company, or you can be a 10-man shop. The risks are the same. As a matter of fact, the risks are greater of having some sort of incident for small to medium-sized businesses than they are for the big guys. And so it's important in every aspect. And I think, at first, you may think, well, why are we talking about this? And this is a finance forum. I think this is where we should talk about it, because CFOs hold the pocketbook. They hold the keys to the pocketbook. And a lot of times they can be advocates for what the CIO or the CISO is trying to do from a security perspective. And so you guys need to be knowledgeable about security. You need to be knowledgeable about how your organizations are protecting your data, right? Because at the end of the day, the whole C-suite can be subject to the chopping block if something happens. And so you want to be as knowledgeable as possible about the risk posed to your organization. If you have the proper security procedures in place, every business initiative, does security have a seat at the table? Or is security an afterthought? It needs to have a seat at the table, as I mentioned, as Alonzo alluded to. So my personal opinion is this is the exact forum these conversations need to be had in, so that everybody acquires the knowledge they need and begin to understand risk.
Yeah, I'd love to Dr. Duggan for 1 sec. As you know, I'm sure we've got a diverse set of participants in the listening to this conversation, and let's say there's a SMB who has aspirations of growing and becoming a large company. Could you just give a bit of a primer on some of the alphabet soup of acronyms, ISO, SOX, just like what are some, because some of those certifications, you certainly can have best practices internally to protect yourselves, but sometimes you also have that badge as a signal to your vendors and potential customers that, hey, we have our shop in order, you can trust your data with us.
So it depends on where you want to do business. If you want to do business globally and you want to grow from a global perspective, ISO, the International Security Standard Organization, they have a series of certifications, not just in cybersecurity, but in business continuity and disaster recovery, COVID, all of those. I would say to the audience, just as I say to my students, research it. Because I will tell you that, especially in the financial services world, they're real big on SOC 2s, right? Which is a certification under AICPA. I am not knocking them by far, but you set the stage on what they assess. If it were me, I would not want to roll in that. I would want someone to, based on a global standard, come in and assess me, if that's the audience I'm trying to obtain business from. So it's also about right-sizing even your security certifications. Does it make sense? Because I will tell you, they're not cheap. They're not cheap. For small and medium businesses, the place I would actually start is making sure that my security aligns with a framework such as the NIST cybersecurity framework or CMMC or SCF. That avenue, number one, is less expensive than trying to jump out and obtain a cert. Number two, if you make sure you're aligned with any one of those frameworks, the process of obtaining a SOC 2 Type 2 or a ISO cert will be easier. That, to me, would be my approach. And I know I didn't define all of the acronyms, but I would say it depends. I hate that answer though, but it really does. It really does depend on where are you trying to go? Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do? Who are you trying to be? to make that decision.
Yeah, and kind of localizing that, kind of any kind of thoughts on that, Alonso, Christopher, how you've approached externally facing certifications, and this can also weave into kind of regulatory and compliance, anything if you're subject to specific regulatory compliance and kind of government compliance, or a nonprofit, if there's something in that world that's nonprofit, likely have to have public financial statements and make other representations about
Yeah.
practices.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we don't necessarily have any certifications like ISO, but we are audited because, you know, we are such of size in New York. And one of the things that our auditors do look at a lot is for our, the organizations we work with, like, for example, our payroll provider and things like that, they do want to look at their SOC certification from the standpoint of, getting comfortable with, ensuring that their systems are certified, and so that's one of the big components of our audit. There is an information security component, and they look at our internal systems, our controls, our process procedures, but then they also look at our vendors and their SOC certification, and particularly the ones that we deal with from a financial standpoint.
Anything else to add to that, Alonso?
Well, no, it's similar to what Christopher said. We're not necessarily required to do the certification. We're a private company. And many companies like that are in the same position. But the only point I would like to add is that for the CFOs, many CFOs or many CIOs report to the CFOs. And as such, this falls under the responsibility of the finance person, either if you are certified or not. You always need to be required as a finance person for the everything related to the investments in IT, especially investments in security, infrastructure, upgraded software. Need to collaborate more and more with your colleagues or in the information system department, because it's part of the responsibility for the entire company, but also to prevent and to guard all the information of the company from the misuse. So it's definitely, I mean, if there's a formal or not a formal way to track it, it still has become more and more the responsibility for the finance person to support these initiatives.
Yeah, definitely. It can definitely create a different dynamic with where that kind of responsibility lies. I think at SeatGeek, we have a chief technology officer, we have head of security, head of information technology. So it's definitely a different dynamic where finance, I think we love to be in the position of, hey, we know the numbers really well. We can kind of find the money. We help guide a resource allocation process. As we're growing and have an expansive tech set, we also sell software that's mission critical to folks. So having security, highly available product is very important. And the role of the CFO suite is more to fund those, but we don't have to kind of come up with what actually needs to be done. We've got the subject matter experts to do that. So I think that's definitely been a healthy dynamic for us. But we're kind of coming up on time, so let's just kind of get maybe final thoughts from each folks, maybe 2 to 3 minutes as we wrap up. Dr. Dogan, want to kick us off?
Sure, I'll kick us off, because the last question in the chat, why are risks greater for SMBs, is a good final thought. They're greater for SMBs because typically you're smaller organizations, and historically the frame of mind has been, well, we only have 10 people, we work in this little hole over here. We have big clients, but it's only 10 of us. And because of that, just like we in the industry have heard that the hackers know it too. Right? The hackers know it. And so because they know that, that leaves SMBs vulnerable if they don't attempt to have security in place that actually aligns with the big boys. You can have good security practices and not spend millions of dollars, right? But just part of it is knowing that you need it, right? And understanding the risk that you pose. So that's why I say the risk is greater there. Doesn't matter the size of the organization. So don't have the misconception that just because you are a small or medium company that you don't need to have good security practices and be in control of your security and how you protect your data and systems.
Great, good stuff. Alonso.
Well, I have the feeling that I was going to learn a lot from this webinar myself, and I did. Thanks for all the thoughts of everybody. And just to build a little bit on what Angela was saying, we're a relatively small, medium-sized company, and we were target. And I don't know how they see it, but probably we're the low-hanging fruit, or when they figure that a company is a certain size, they did not prepare. So that's an easier way to attack. And if they're doing it, is because they know it's effective. So that tells you immediately the answer. So in that sense, yes, you need to take it very seriously and do every attempt to prevent this. I use the word education many times during this session. I think that's a big key. Angela said a couple of times, I mean, it's Teddy as well, it's people sits at the center of the issue here. The first thing they go after is not necessarily a code or a computer, a server, is the mind of people, because that's when they know that's the weakness. So if you educate those minds, you have a better chance to have to keep your information safe. And again, thanks for letting me participate.
Yeah, it's amazing we're still talking about phishing, 20 plus years after all of these systems come on board. But I think with automation and the tools on both sides of the equation are both getting more advanced at the same time. I think, cloud providers have also gotten very good at just blocking stuff to even reaching you. And then, for example, a security team also takes like trusted domain types approaches where we look out for certain stuff. Christopher, I'd love just get last couple of minutes to you.
Sure, I just want to echo everything that everyone said. Particularly be focused on your people, because they are your greatest resource, but they're also probably the first target for nefarious people who are trying to attack your system, get information, get data, and be very mindful. That take it seriously, because yes, there's an expense related to investing in your information security. But there's also a much bigger cost if your client data, and for us, our donor data is stolen or leaked somewhere. It could be very damaging for the organization and for people going forward with trust, putting donations or money in our hands.
Yeah, it's great. And as a probably a mostly finance focused audience, it's good to kind of get out of our models and spreadsheets and other day-to-day operations for the last hour. It's good to I certainly learned some stuff as well, and hopefully you all did as well. And I want to kick it back over to Brittany to give kind of an outro.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for such an insightful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you all so much again.